The surveillance footage was grainy, but Lisa froze the frame. Room 207, motel key still swinging from the lock. And there, just before the figure stepped into shadow, was the unmistakable silhouette of Caleb Voss. The man they'd buried in paperwork months ago. But he wasn't the one who haunted Daniel's mind. It was the man in the mask, the one Ava drew in her sleep, the one Maya whispered about in the dark. He wears the same mask in every room. And somehow, through all the encrypted drives, the broken glass, the scorched files, there was one constant shadow. The German shepherd, who had been there from the beginning, who had tracked the untrackable. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about instinct, memory. A dog who never forgot the scent of fear or the faint heartbeat of a boy still alive. Because monsters hide behind masks, but they forget dogs see through everything. The sun hung lazily above Portland's Riverlight Park, its golden light dancing across the water of the central fountain where children played with abandon. The scent of grilled corn and sunscreen floated on the breeze. It was the kind of day that made you forget danger ever existed. Until it did. Lucas Bennett was 8 years old, wearing a red t-shirt that said, "Stay Wild," sneakers that lit up when he ran, and a smile that belonged to summer. He darted around the edge of the fountain, chasing reflections and splashing water with his hands. His mother, Julia Bennett, sat on a nearby bench under the shade of a sprawling maple, a paperback book resting open on her lap, though her eyes never truly left her son. Everything about the moment was ordinary, perfectly, painfully ordinary, until the air changed. It began with silence, the kind that comes not from peace, but from something missing, a hesitation in the rhythm of the park, the kind parents feel in their bones. Julia looked up. "Lucas?" Her voice was casual at first, almost playful. No answer. She stood up, eyes scanning the area, expecting to see him ducking behind one of the stone lions flanking the fountain. But there was no red shirt, no giggle, no sound of splashing feet. "Lucas!" she said again, louder now. Her book fell, forgotten on the bench. A woman nearby turned to look. Then another. A ripple passed through the park, subtle and chilling. One moment there had been laughter, music, life, and in the next there was a hole. Julia was running now toward the fountain, around the benches, behind the snack kiosk, her voice rising with each breathless shout. "Lucas! Baby! Where are you?" Still nothing. And then came the scream. It wasn't a cry or a shout. It was a raw, splitting sound of a mother realizing the world had just swallowed her child whole. People froze. Heads turned. Someone dropped their phone. Within minutes, sirens pierced the air, cutting through the warmth like cold steel. Red and blue lights danced across the trunks of trees. Police tape cordoned off the grass. A perimeter was set up, and Riverlight Park, once full of life, now trembled under the weight of fear. Julia collapsed to her knees in the grass, shaking, arms clutching herself as if holding in what little control she had left. A female officer tried to steady her, speaking calmly, but nothing could reach through the haze of panic flooding Julia's mind. Her voice was hoarse from screaming, her hands bloody from clawing the bark off trees she thought he might have climbed. "I just looked away for a second," she kept repeating. "Just a second." Witnesses were questioned. Children were counted. Footage from nearby cameras, crosswalks, storefronts, a gas station 2 blocks over was requested. A command post was set up within the hour. The word abduction hadn't been spoken aloud yet, but it hung there invisible and heavy in every breath. Detective Michael Rayner, head of Portland's Missing Persons Unit, arrived with a file under his arm and a frown etched deep between his eyes. He looked around, jaw clenched. It had been 6 months, 6 blessedly quiet months since the last time something like this had happened. And now, here they were again. What he didn't say, what no one dared say yet, was what everyone was thinking. This is exactly how it started last time. As night approached, the sky bruised purple and gray, casting long shadows over the swing sets and picnic tables. Flashlights flickered through bushes. Drones scanned from above. Dogs were called in, though not all of them made it in time. And somewhere in the chaos, in the back of a dark SUV pulling up to the perimeter, a pair of amber eyes stared out from behind the mesh partition. Shadow. The German shepherd stepped out slowly, paws silent against the pavement, nose lifted slightly to catch the scent on the wind. His handler, Special Agent Daniel Cross, closed the vehicle door without a word. He didn't need to be told why he was here. He could see it in the way the crowd parted like water around grief, in the way the mother trembled against a stranger's shoulder, in the way every officer looked 10 years older than they had that morning. Daniel scanned the scene, then looked down at Shadow, whose body was tense, tail still. The dog's ears flicked, his nostrils flared, and a low, almost imperceptible sound rumbled from his throat. Not quite a growl, more like a warning. "He senses it," Daniel murmured under his breath. An officer approached. "Agent Cross, we weren't expecting FBI so soon." "You weren't," Daniel replied, eyes fixed on the fountain. "But we were." He crouched beside Shadow and whispered something only the dog could hear. Shadow's gaze swept the park, every scent, every footprint, every change in the air, telling him a story humans could never quite translate. The boy was gone, not wandered off, not hiding, taken. And as the moon rose slowly above Portland, and the whispers of parents clutched their children closer, Shadow let out a single, low bark, sharp, controlled, and mournful. The summer had gone still. 6 months earlier, outskirts of Portland. The rain that night came sideways, sheets of it, like knives against the windshield. Streetlights flickered, shadows writhed in alleys, and the world seemed to fold in on itself with every crack of thunder. Daniel Cross gripped the steering wheel tighter as the SUV rounded a corner onto a gravel road nearly swallowed by mud. Beside him, Shadow sat motionless, eyes locked on the windshield, ears twitching with every shift in wind. He was restless, not from the storm, but from instinct. The radio crackled. "Unit 6, we have confirmation anonymous tip matched with previous reports. Possible child inside the structure. Approach with caution." Daniel clicked his mic. "Copy that. We're 1 minute out." The building appeared through the sheets of rain like a carcass wood, slats rotting, windows broken, its roof sagging like an exhausted breath. A derelict 2-story farmhouse on the edge of nowhere, forgotten by time and everyone but evil. Daniel parked, reached for his flashlight, and opened the back door. "Let's go, boy." Shadow leapt out, nose instantly in the air, muscles taut like a drawn bow. He didn't hesitate. His paws splashed through puddles, leading straight to the warped front door. Something had brought him here before Daniel even knew where here was. The door creaked open. The scent hit first mold, urine, fear. Years of neglect, and something newer, more human. Daniel swept his light across the room. A broken table, stained mattress, syringes, a child's pink shoe tucked beneath an overturned chair. Shadow froze, then turned sharply toward a narrow hallway. That was all Daniel needed. They moved like they had dozens of times before, man and dog, intuition and instinct, one filling the space where the other left off. The hallway narrowed, and Shadow suddenly stopped, nose pressed to the floorboards. A guttural growl rolled in his chest. Daniel knelt. "What is it, buddy?" Shadow looked up, then placed his paw twice against the warped floor. Tap, tap, beneath them. Daniel's heart thudded. He pulled his radio. "We need backup at the location. Possible crawlspace beneath the floor. Gonna breach." The storm howled outside as Daniel pried open the boards. The smell grew worse. He dropped down into the black. At first there was only silence, and then breathing, ragged, shallow, afraid. His flashlight landed on her face. Ava Miller, 7 years old, pale, trembling, eyes open but unseeing, body curled against the corner like she was trying to disappear into the earth. A strip of cloth hung loose around her neck. Duct tape was stuck in her hair. Daniel froze for a beat too long. His breath caught. Then he moved. "Ava?" he said gently, crouching. "My name is Daniel. You're safe now." The girl flinched. Shadow appeared beside him, nudging forward carefully, his body low, ears pinned. He never barked, never growled, just stood still, close enough for the girl to see him. Ava's eyes locked onto the dog. Her fingers twitched. Then she reached out, barely a whisper of movement, and touched Shadow's nose. That was the moment she started breathing again. 2 days later, the trial of Ethan Drake began. The evidence felt overwhelming. His fingerprints were on the boards above Ava's head. His DNA matched the strip of cloth. His alibi was fractured and contradictory. A hard drive had been found in his possession, empty but suspicious. And then there was Ava's testimony, fragmented, fragile. But when asked if the man who took her was in the courtroom, she pointed at Ethan. The prosecution didn't need more. The jury barely deliberated. Ethan Drake was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. News anchors called it a rare moment of swift justice. Headlines across the region hailed the FBI's swift resolution. Daniel's photo standing next to Shadow, a blanket around Ava's shoulders, circulated for weeks. He became the reluctant face of victory. But Daniel never smiled in those photos, because something about it never sat right. Shadow had hesitated that night, just briefly, but long enough. Long enough for Daniel to remember it now, 6 months later, like a splinter still buried under skin. And then there was the hard drive too clean, the timeline too precise, and Ethan's demeanor strange, not remorseful, not angry, just resigned. As if he was serving a sentence for a crime someone else had already promised him he'd never escape. Now, back in the present, Daniel stood alone in his apartment office. The walls around him were lined with files, reports, and photographs. In the center of his desk was a single image, Ava Miller, holding Shadow's face in her small hands, whispering something into his fur. Daniel exhaled slowly. 6 months. 6 months of silence. Of no new leads, no signs of a larger operation. And now, Lucas Bennett had vanished the exact same way. Daniel looked down. Shadow sat at the door, eyes locked onto the flickering TV screen showing a news report from Riverlight Park. Lucas's red shirt flashed for a split second in one of the background shots. The dog let out a low, steady whine. Daniel didn't need confirmation. His instincts had always told him something about Ava's case was unfinished. Now Shadow was telling him the same, and this time Daniel Cross wasn't waiting for permission. He picked up the phone. "Lisa, it's Daniel. I need your help reopening a case." The apartment was quiet, too quiet for a man who carried ghosts. Daniel Cross stood in his office, bathed in the glow of an old desk lamp that cast long shadows on the walls lined with case files, sticky notes, and red-threaded maps that had yellowed at the corners. The air smelled faintly of dust and ink, nostalgic, heavy. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window pane, as if the sky, too, had things it needed to confess. Shadow lay nearby on the hardwood floor, but he wasn't resting. His body was tense, ears up, amber eyes fixed on the muted TV playing in the corner. The news anchor's lips moved over a chyron that read, "Breaking, 8-year-old Lucas Bennett missing from Riverlight Park." The footage cut to a blurry clip from a bystander's phone. A red shirt darting near the fountain, a panicked voice screaming a name. And then, nothing. Shadow growled low in his throat. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was unsettled. Like the dog was remembering something before Daniel even had the chance to feel it. Daniel turned from the screen. He didn't need more confirmation. He'd seen this before. He crossed the room and opened a drawer he hadn't touched in months. Inside were 3 folders, each worn, soft at the edges, marked with the kind of permanent ink that refuses to fade. He pulled out the middle one. Subject: Ethan Drake, case number 7194B. He laid it out across the desk. Photos spilled out, evidence tags, courtroom stills, the image of Ava Miller in a hospital bed. Daniel's eyes scanned the printed reports, the psychiatric profile, the interview transcripts. The first thing that bothered him again was the timeline. Ethan had no criminal record, no prior behavioral flags, no history of violence, not even a speeding ticket. He worked quietly at a plumbing supply store, lived alone, filed taxes on time, read books about ecology. And yet, overnight, he was pegged as a child predator with military-grade concealment skills? Daniel exhaled through his nose and leaned forward. The digital evidence had always rubbed him wrong. The laptop Ethan used had nothing on it, no browser history, no storage remnants, no deleted folders, not even fragmented data. It was surgically clean, too clean. And then there was the audio Ava's whisper in the hospital bed, naming Ethan after a pause. But what if that pause wasn't hesitation out of fear, but confusion? Daniel rubbed a hand down his face, jaw tightening. The truth had always lived in the space between things, in what was missing, in what felt off. And right now, everything inside him screamed something is off again. A notification pinged on his laptop. He opened it. An automatic report of the Riverlight case had been shared with federal liaisons. The language mirrored the Ava case in almost eerie precision. Minor, public abduction, no witnesses, last seen near water. Daniel whispered under his breath, "They're not copying the pattern. They're continuing it." From the corner of the room, Shadow gave a short bark and stood. He stared at the screen, his eyes unblinking, tail stiff. Daniel looked at him. "You feel it too, don't you?" Shadow let out a soft whine and padded closer, placing one paw gently on the edge of the desk where the files sat open. It was subtle, but it was deliberate. Daniel stared at the paw for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. She answered on the second ring. "Tanaka," a tired voice mumbled, the buzz of computers humming faintly in the background. "Lisa, it's Daniel." Pause. "Jesus, what time is it?" "Late. I know that voice. she said, sitting up straighter. "You're not calling to catch up. I need a favor." Quietly. A heavier pause. Then, "Talk to me." He told her everything. Well, not everything. Just enough. Lucas's disappearance, the similarities to Ava, the file inconsistencies, the untouched laptop, the pause in Ava's testimony, the gut feeling that wouldn't shut up even after 6 months of silence. Lisa didn't interrupt. When he finished, the line stayed quiet for a moment. Finally, "You're not crazy." Daniel blinked. "I didn't say I was." "You didn't have to. The last time we talked about Ethan Drake, you sounded like you were trying to convince yourself it was over. I never bought it either. You've got a dog with better instincts than half our department, and even he wasn't convinced." Daniel glanced at Shadow, who sat by the window now, watching the city lights through the rain. "You still have access to those financial tracking tools?" he asked. Lisa sighed. "They'll take my badge if I get caught. But yeah. I need anything offshore activity, shell companies, cryptocurrency flow, anything that ties Drake to someone higher up, someone we didn't see. You think he was paid off? I think he was planted." Lisa cursed under her breath. "You think there's more kids out there?" "I think this isn't the end of something," Daniel said. "It's the middle." She was quiet again. Then, "Give me a few hours, I'll send what I find." "Thanks." "Hey, Cross?" "Yeah?" "If you're right, and this thing's still alive, what do you plan to do?" Daniel looked down at the photo of Ava hugging Shadow, then at the image of Lucas on the news feed. He answered without thinking. "Finish what we didn't." The city thinned the farther east. Daniel drove glass towers giving way to graffiti-tagged warehouses, empty lots riddled with weeds, and streets that knew silence too well. This was the part of Portland no one talked about in glossy brochures. The kind of place where things went missing and no one noticed. Until now. Shadow stood in the back seat, his body rigid, eyes alert through the rear window as if he already knew where they were going. As if something old had stirred inside him, some scent, some memory that had refused to die. Daniel turned onto a cracked industrial road lined with rusted fencing and sagging telephone poles. Shadow let out a sharp bark, then whined once, low and deliberate. "You smell it, don't you?" Daniel murmured. He slowed the car. The warehouse appeared to the left, its corrugated metal siding dulled by years of rain and neglect, windows busted out like hollow eyes. It sat hunched between two other abandoned structures, forgotten but not empty, not to Shadow. Daniel parked and stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots. The air was thick with dampness, and something else, something sour. He unlatched the back door. Shadow jumped out without a sound, nose immediately to the wind. No flashlight, no radio chatter, just him and the dog. Shadow moved ahead, guided by something no human could sense. His ears flicked. His body dipped low. Every few steps he'd stop, sniff the ground, then press forward like a ghost moving through time. Daniel followed him around the side of the warehouse. The gate was twisted off its hinges, the lock sheared clean like someone wanted in and didn't care who noticed. Shadow paused at the threshold, tail stiff, nose buried against the doorframe. Daniel pulled a glove from his pocket and brushed his fingers across the same spot. Sticky. Oily. Gasoline. He looked at Shadow. "Someone came through here fast. And dirty." The warehouse door gave with a loud metallic groan when pushed open. Inside, the air shifted, dust mixed with damp concrete. and something older. The scent of things forgotten. The kind of silence that isn't peace, but aftermath. Shadow stepped inside first, slow and surgical. Daniel followed with his flashlight, low and wide. The beam passed over scattered debris, splintered crates, rusted nails, a broken office chair on its side. Then Shadow stopped. His paw lifted, hovered, then pressed down lightly in a patch of dust. Daniel knelt beside him, light sweeping the floor. Footprints. Small. Child-sized. Daniel's chest tightened. The impressions weren't deep, but they were clear left to right, light on the heels, like someone was walking barefoot or trying to tiptoe. He traced the pattern with the flashlight. It curved toward the far wall, then disappeared behind a stack of warped plywood boards. Shadow was already ahead, nose buried against the base of the wall. "Someone was here," Daniel whispered, almost to himself. "A kid, recently." Shadow let out a short, frustrated whine, pawing at the concrete. Daniel crouched and pressed his hand to the floor. It was cold, but not just cold. It smelled faintly of damp rubber and motor oil. He stood, scanning the area, and then he saw them outside, near the loading dock. Tire tracks. Not just one set, but two. One narrow, almost like a delivery van. The other, wider, heavy-duty, meant for hauling. The marks were fresh mud, still soft, displaced gravel only slightly wind-scattered. Daniel pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos. Then he closed his eyes, breathing in slowly through his nose. The gasoline wasn't an accident. Whoever came here was planning to destroy something, or erase it. But they didn't. Not yet. Shadow moved again, this time toward a stack of old tarps in the corner. He pawed at them, then stiffened. Daniel came over, moved the tarp aside. A red hair clip. Child's. He picked it up, carefully dropping it into a zip bag. Then he looked around once more, taking in the space, the makeshift shelter it had become. Or perhaps something worse. The ground near the back wall had scuff marks, like furniture or restraints had been moved. A belt lay half buried beneath dust, metal buckle oxidized from neglect. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. The room felt too still, like it was holding its breath. Shadow let out a low growl. Daniel looked at him. The dog's posture was different now. Not alert tense. Like something had passed through here not long ago, something Shadow didn't like. Daniel turned slowly, scanned the edges of the warehouse. The darkness pressed in, but nothing moved. Still, the feeling remained. They were standing in someone's footprint, not just the child's, but the one who brought them here. And that person wasn't done yet. Daniel pulled his phone from his pocket and called Lisa. "Tanaka," she answered immediately, her voice sharper than last time. "I found something," Daniel said. "Footprints, a hair clip, gasoline residue, tire tracks." "Coordinates?" "I'll send them now. This place wasn't random. They've used it before." Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then, "Want me to run traffic cams near the area?" "And pull utility access logs," Daniel added. "Anything in a 2-block radius with unauthorized entry." "Copy that. What do you think it is?" Daniel looked at Shadow, who still hadn't moved. "A message," he said. "They're not hiding. They're watching." Under the Eastburn Overpass, Portland, same night, 11:42 p.m. The overpass was cold, even in June. Concrete pillars loomed like silent sentinels, streaked with mildew, urine stains, and the fingerprints of lives most people preferred not to see. Daniel pulled his coat tighter as he stepped over a patch of cardboard and cans. Shadow walked beside him, silent, yet not, relaxed ears flicking, tail low but alert. They moved slowly, careful not to startle. In the far corner, a fire burned low inside a rusted drum. A figure sat near it, cross-legged on an old sleeping bag, half-wrapped in a green military poncho that had long since surrendered its color to weather and ash. Daniel stopped a few feet away. The man didn't look up. "Samuel Brenner?" Daniel asked gently. The man blinked, as if surfacing from somewhere deep. His beard was patchy gray, cheeks weathered like tree bark. He wore a knit cap under the hood, pulled low over watery eyes that darted to Shadow first, then to Daniel's badge clipped to his belt. "I'm not in trouble," Samuel mumbled, voice thick from years of talking to no one. "Didn't touch no kid. Didn't touch nobody." "You're not in trouble," Daniel said softly. "I just need to ask you about something you saw 6 months ago, the night Ava Miller went missing." Samuel winced at the name. "Girl with the yellow jacket," he whispered. "Little one. I saw her." Daniel crouched, not too close, just enough to make the conversation feel like something human. Shadow sat down beside him, still but watchful. "I believe you," Daniel said. "You were under this same bridge that night, weren't you?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Same spot. Safer here than in the shelters." "Can you tell me what you saw?" The man rubbed his hands together as if warming himself against more than just the cold. His gaze kept flicking to the flames. Finally, after a long pause, "There were 2 vans," he said, "about an hour after sundown. First one came fast, no lights. Big white or gray, slid right past, back tires squealed. No plates on the back." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "And the second?" Samuel's fingers trembled as he traced an invisible shape in the air. "It was darker, black or deep green maybe, slower, moved like it had all the time in the world." "Did you see anyone driving?" Samuel shook his head. "Tinted windows, couldn't see faces, but—" He hesitated. Shadow tilted his head, as if sensing the weight behind the silence. "But what?" Daniel asked. "There was a guy standing outside the first van for a moment," Samuel murmured. "Smoked a cigarette, gloved hands. I saw the back of his neck when he scratched it." Daniel's breath caught. "Did he have a tattoo?" Samuel nodded. "Can you describe it?" His voice dropped to almost nothing. "A snake, coiled, head raised, black ink. But the thing that stuck with me, the number." Daniel's heart began to pound. "What number?" Samuel closed his eyes. 89, right in the middle, like the snake was hugging it." Daniel froze. Serpent. 89. He'd heard of it once. Unit 89, a ghost story among narcotics units. Whispers of a syndicate that operated like a private army, using vehicles with no plates, men with no records, and logistics that always disappeared just before warrants were filed. "You didn't tell anyone this?" Daniel asked. Samuel gave a bitter laugh. "Who'd believe a crazy vet sleeping under bridges? Cops came once. I told one of them. He wrote it down. Never came back." Daniel swallowed hard. "Do you remember which direction they went?" Samuel pointed east, past the line of trees and into the industrial district. "Toward the freight yards, where nobody asked questions." Daniel took a breath and reached slowly into his coat. He pulled out a fresh pack of socks and an MRE military issue, still warm. He held them out. "Thank you," he said simply. Samuel looked at them, then at Daniel, his eyes glassy. "You believe me?" "I believe you saw what you saw," Daniel said. and I think it's more than anyone ever gave you credit for." Shadow stood, as if something invisible had shifted in the space between them all. Before Daniel left, he paused. "If you remember anything else, anything, you find a way to get word to me, or someone named Lisa Tanaka at the Bureau. Tell them it's for Cross." Samuel nodded slowly and whispered something only the wind caught. As Daniel walked back to the car, Shadow at his side, a storm was beginning to build in the northwest sky. Thick, silent clouds, the color of old bruises, rolled across the moon. It had taken 6 months, 2 disappearances, and the silence of a man discarded by the world, to finally hear the truth. And now Daniel knew something he couldn't unknow. Lucas wasn't an isolated tragedy. He was part of a pattern. And the serpent? It had never stopped moving. Portland FBI Field Office, Digital Forensics Wing, 8:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the kind of sterile brightness that made every blemish on a wall feel like a confession. Daniel Cross stood beside a cluttered workstation, arms folded, Shadow lying beside him still, yet distinctly alert. Across from them, Lisa Tanaka's fingers danced across her keyboard. Lines of code scrolled like incantations. A digital autopsy of a man the system had long since declared resolved. "You're telling me a homeless vet under a bridge gave you more detail than half our original task force?" Lisa muttered, eyes glued to her second monitor. "He remembered the tattoo," Daniel said, pulling a folded sketch from his pocket. "A serpent wrapped around the number 89. Lisa looked up and froze. "I know that mark," she said. Daniel's brow furrowed. "You've seen it before?" She spun her chair slightly and opened an old sealed archive. Dusty metadata blinked to life on her screen like ghosts being summoned. A redacted case file surfaced, half its contents hidden behind clearance blocks Daniel no longer had access to. "Obsidian coil," she whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "That's a myth." Lisa gave a humorless smile. "So was Pluto until they put a name on it." She clicked, dragging up a decade-old organizational chart. Aliases, roles, dead ends. At the center, the emblem. A serpent coiled tight around a black ring, fangs bared above the number 89. "They trafficked in everything. Children, data, influence," she said quietly. "Then vanished after a federal sweep in Prague. We thought they were fractured, gone for good." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low. "What if they never left? What if they just changed skins?" Lisa leaned back. "You think Ethan Drake was part of this?" "I think the conviction was too easy," Daniel replied. "No network, no accomplice, no financial trail. That's not how these guys operate." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Want to test the theory?" She pulled up Drake's financials. The first few months post-conviction showed nothing unusual. Government paychecks, a modest mortgage, grocery runs. But then she found it. "There," Lisa said, pointing. "Offshore deposit, Belize account, masked through 2 LLCs. Daniel felt his pulse rise. She kept digging. 1 transaction every month, cleanly staggered, 5 figures each time. "All started 6 months before Ava's abduction," Lisa murmured. "And the last deposit hit 1 week before Lucas disappeared." Daniel stared at the screen. "He was being paid," he said under his breath, "either to stay silent or to take the fall." Behind him, Shadow shifted. Daniel turned. The German shepherd had approached one of the metal file drawers in the side cabinet. His ears were forward, nose twitching. He let out a low, throaty growl not of aggression, but memory. Daniel crouched. "What is it, boy?" He opened the drawer Shadow stood before. Inside, one old case file, yellowed edges, a single manila folder with a worn label, Cross, D, Drake, E, Joint Task, Prague, 2012, his own handwriting. Daniel pulled it out slowly. The folder crackled like it hadn't been touched in years. Shadow's growl faded, but his body remained tense. His pupils locked on the pages as if he too remembered something, something buried too deep for words but alive in instinct. Daniel flipped it open. Inside, surveillance stills from the Prague operation. Ethan Drake, younger, standing beside him. But in one frame, Ethan wasn't looking at the camera. He was shaking hands with someone in the shadows. And on that man's wrist, a serpent tattoo. Daniel's throat went dry. "Lisa," he said hoarsely, "I think we made a mistake 10 years ago." Lisa read the folder's header. "You worked with Drake in Prague?" "I thought I did," Daniel said quietly. "But this looks more like cover than cooperation." He stared at the final page, an unsent report, half written in his own hand, time-stamped 2 days before the Prague raid. Subject shows unusual familiarity with target zones. Surveillance suggests unsanctioned meetings. Recommend internal review. It cut off mid-sentence. "I never submitted this," Daniel murmured. Lisa looked up at him. "Why not?" He didn't answer. Not out of guilt, but out of something worse. Doubt. Because now, it wasn't just about Lucas Bennett or Ava Miller. It was about everything they'd buried beneath the idea that the case was closed. Shadow sat beside him now, his body pressed close. Not for comfort, but because he knew. Something had come loose in the dark. A serpent uncoiling after 10 years underground. And this time, they wouldn't just be chasing ghosts. They'd be hunted by them. The low hum of servers was the only sound in the dimly lit room, save for the occasional tap of Lisa Tanaka's fingers against her keyboard. Her eyes, dry, sleepless, but razor-sharp, were locked on a terminal filled with layered shell corporations, false addresses, and synthetic transactions so clean they could have been laundering time itself. Daniel Cross stood behind her, arms crossed, the tension in his jaw unmistakable. Shadow sat at his heel like a statue, but his ears twitched at every sudden click, as if the dog could sense each lie being stripped away. "We found the money trail," Lisa said. "It wasn't just offshore." Daniel leaned in. "Go on." She pulled up a document, a corporate registry from the Cayman Islands. "The company wiring funds to Ethan Drake? It's called Elandra Security Logistics. Looks clean. Shows up as a contractor for several ports and private airports." Lisa zoomed in, fingers narrowing to a small line of fine print buried in the metadata. "But 10 years ago," she said, "it went by another name, Black Elandra Holdings, which was owned at the time by this man." She dropped a file into the main screen. Daniel inhaled sharply. The photo was grainy, pulled from a combat deployment record. Square jaw, buzz-cut, icy blue eyes. Eyes that stared into the camera like it had asked a question it had no right to. Name, Caleb Voss. Unit, SOCOM, disavowed. Status, missing, presumed deceased. "No," Daniel muttered. "That's impossible." Lisa's voice was low. "You know him?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His gaze didn't move from the screen, but his memories did. Back to the dry heat of Kandahar, to blurred nights on ops too dirty for documentation, and to a man with dead eyes who spoke of chaos not as a hazard, but as currency. He wasn't just special ops, Daniel said quietly. He was black level, off book, the kind of operator that made the rest of us nervous. Lisa frowned. His record was sealed tighter than a warhead casing. I had to root through a Belarusian dump server to even find that photo. Daniel exhaled, backing away a step. Voss vanished after his name came up during an internal review of 2 child trafficking cases linked to Army contractors. It was buried, no charges, no follow-up, just a quiet note in someone's inbox. Handled. Who buried it? Lisa asked. Daniel stared at her, and for a moment there was real hesitation in his eyes. The same people who gave us the Prague assignment, he said. The ones who said Obsidian Coil doesn't exist. Lisa's face hardened. So Drake didn't just take hush money, she whispered. He took money from a man who shouldn't even be alive. Daniel looked at Shadow, who had gotten up and now paced near the door, not restlessly, but methodically, like he sensed the stakes had shifted. What if Voss never left? Daniel asked. What if he went underground and rebuilt Coil piece by piece? Lisa stared at the screen. If that's true, then Ava and Lucas aren't isolated cases. They're chapters. Daniel's phone vibrated. A message from Captain Hendricks at Missing Persons. No sign of Lucas yet, but we've got a partial match on a van plate near Riverlight Park that day. I'm sending you footage. H. Daniel clicked the attachment. It was shaky dashcam footage from a city maintenance vehicle shot near the park entrance the day Lucas vanished. A dark van pulls into view. No markings, no plates on the rear. The driver's window reflects nothing, except, for a split second, a hand resting on the steering wheel. Tattooed. A serpent, coiled around the number 89. Lisa leaned in, breath caught. He's back. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he never left. He stared at the footage again, zooming into that ghost of a reflection. The hand was scarred. The tattoo? Slightly faded, like it had been burned once and healed crooked. Shadow, he whispered. The German shepherd padded over. Daniel turned the screen toward him. The dog growled low, not a memory growl, but one of recognition, not of a scent or sound, but of danger remembered in the bones. Lisa looked up. You think Shadow's seen him before? Daniel nodded. If Voss was anywhere near that Prague operation, and if he was pulling Drake's strings, then yes. He looked back at the screen one last time. That scarred, tattooed hand said more than words ever could. The past hadn't come calling. It had never stopped whispering. FBI Field Office, Portland, 2:17 a.m. The silence of the conference room was thick. One of those silences that didn't invite thought but warned against it. Daniel Cross sat at the head of the long, cold table, elbows on the surface, brow furrowed. The playback file blinked softly on the laptop screen. A faint blinking red dot, like the pulse of something that should have stayed dead. Lisa Tanaka slid a hard drive across the table toward him. This is it. Pulled it from the raw surveillance feed during Ava's recovery, not part of the official report. Daniel's gaze didn't move. Because it wasn't supposed to exist. Lisa hesitated. It's voice only. Clean audio. Encrypted but cracked. He hit play. Voice distortion. Male. Transport her. 10 minutes. Keep her quiet. Static. Then silence. The hair on Daniel's arms rose. He'd heard a lot of voices in his career begging, bargaining, barking orders. But this one didn't command by volume. It commanded by absence, an emotional void so total it made the words feel like surgical instruments. Lisa leaned in. Now listen to this. She opened a second audio file, this one labeled only with a timestamp. Inbound tip, 01:03 a.m. Untraceable. It had come in just an hour ago. No origin, no callback, no waveform signature that held. It was almost as if the message had surfaced just to exist and then dissolve. Same voice. "You're chasing shadows, Agent Cross. Some things don't want to be found." Daniel froze. Shadow, lying at his side, lifted his head at the exact same moment. A soft growl rumbled from the dog's throat, not from threat, but memory, like a tremor down the leash of instinct. "It's the same," Lisa whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Same cadence, same tone, same detachment. He played the first clip again. "Transporter, 10 minutes. Keep her quiet." Then the second. "You're chasing shadows, Agent Cross." Daniel leaned back, and for the first time in days, he looked tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. "Whoever he is," he muttered, "he doesn't care that we know. In fact, he wants us to." Lisa bit her lip, her fingers twitching over the keyboard. "I ran the voice through 3 different forensic models. All came back null. Even the AI voice-matching tools like it was trained to evade them." "Because it probably was," Daniel said. "You don't run a syndicate that traffics kids and launder operatives like Voss without understanding digital footprint control." He rubbed his eyes. "The message, 'You're chasing shadows,' that's not a warning." Lisa glanced up. "Then what?" "A taunt," he said. "It's his way of saying, 'I know exactly how close you are and it still doesn't matter.'" Lisa pulled up a waveform comparison on the screen. There's a tiny audio watermark inaudible to the human ear, buried in the low end of the second file. She tapped a key, amplifying it. It was just a tone, then another, then silence. "2 frequencies," Lisa said. "They don't mean anything on their own, but if you run them through spectrographic software—" She hit another button. The screen flashed. A symbol appeared, barely visible, twisted, metallic-looking, like it had been drawn in frost across a black mirror. A serpent, wrapped around the number 89. Daniel stared at it, the color draining from his face. "That's not a signature," he said hoarsely. "That's a seal." Lisa's voice dropped. "He wants us to know it was him. He wants us to know this wasn't over, that it never was." Daniel looked down at Shadow, whose gaze remained locked on the laptop screen, as though the dog could feel something just beneath the surface. A voice not just heard, but remembered in bone and blood. "He's orchestrating it all," Daniel whispered. "Lucas's abduction, Ava's fake rescue, the trail back to Voss. It's all designed." Lisa exhaled. "To do what?" Daniel looked up at her, eyes like flint. "To see who would follow the breadcrumbs, and how far they'd go before breaking." The laptop dinged. Another anonymous message had arrived. No traceable IP, no sender ID, just one line. "The next child won't be so lucky." Lisa covered her mouth. "He's watching us." Daniel stood slowly. "Then let's give him a show." He turned off the laptop, snapping the lid shut like a coffin closing. "We leak false intel," he said. "Let him think we're biting the wrong trail. Meanwhile, you dig deeper into Elandra Holdings. Find the transfer protocols. I want to know who's moving what, where, and why." Lisa nodded. Shadow barked once, sharp, definitive, as if to say, "We're not chasing shadows anymore. We're hunting them." The crayons snapped before she even realized she was pressing too hard. Emily Miller blinked down at the jagged wax in her hand, red and black, smeared across the page, thick and frantic like someone trying to scratch something out rather than draw it in. Sarah stood at the doorway, watching her daughter from a distance that was more emotional than physical. The little girl hadn't spoken in almost 2 hours, not since dinner, not since she dropped her fork after hearing a car backfire outside. "I'm not trying to scare you," Sarah said softly, entering the room. I just want to understand, sweetie." Emily didn't look up. She was too focused now, the way only children can be when something inside them is louder than the world outside. She reached for a new crayon, this one a deep, dull green, and began to color over the silhouette she'd already drawn. It was tall, broad-shouldered, and masked. Sarah crouched beside her daughter, trying to hold her breath still, like her exhale might disturb something sacred. "Is that from one of your dreams?" Emily's small fingers paused. Then, slowly, she nodded. Sarah looked down at the paper. It wasn't the first drawing like this over the past week. They'd stacked up like unwanted letters from a past no one wanted to open, but this one was different. The mask was more detailed now. 2 vertical slits where the eyes should have been, lines etched into it almost like scales, and at the center, barely visible under the pressure of the green wax, a symbol, a serpent, twisting, coiling. Sarah felt the chill crawl up her spine. "Emily, was this person real?" A long pause. Then the child whispered, "He watched." Sarah swallowed hard. "Did he talk to you?" Emily shook her head. "No, just watched, from behind the glass. The others, they listened to him, but he never said anything. He didn't need to." She picked up another crayon and began shading the corners of the drawing in black. She pressed harder and harder until the paper curled beneath the pressure. Sarah reached out and gently placed a hand over her daughter's. "You're safe now. You know that, right?" But Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were distant, somewhere between memory and dream, between truth and what she was told to forget. Later that night, after Emily had finally drifted into a restless sleep, her tiny hand still clinging to a crumpled sketch, Sarah sat alone in the kitchen, the weight of silence unbearable. The night outside was calm, but inside her chest everything stormed. The doorbell startled her. She moved cautiously, peering through the blinds. Daniel Cross stood on the porch, flanked by Shadow. The dog's posture was alert but calm, as though it knew this house remembered something it hadn't spoken yet. Sarah opened the door. "She's asleep," she said quietly. "But I think you need to see this." Daniel followed her into the kitchen. Shadow's claws tapped gently on the hardwood floor as he moved like a ghost past the crayon drawings pinned to the fridge. He paused before one, sniffed and growled so low it was almost inaudible. Sarah laid the latest drawing on the table. Daniel leaned in. The serpent. Again. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "Did Emily ever talk about someone besides Ethan Drake? Someone who didn't touch her, didn't speak, just observed?" Sarah's eyes glistened. "I thought she was imagining it. Some figment, some coping mechanism. She never described him the same way twice. Some nights he wore black, other times he was just there. But the mask, that part never changed." Daniel nodded slowly. "Because monsters with masks don't need faces, just symbols." Sarah sat down, her voice breaking. "I never told the Bureau everything." Daniel looked up sharply. "I wanted it to be over. I needed it to be over. She wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. And when they said they found the man who did it, when they said Ethan confessed, you didn't push." "No," she whispered. "I wanted to believe him guilty, because the alternative meant it wasn't finished." Daniel glanced at Shadow. The dog was sitting perfectly still, ears tilted toward the hallway, as though listening for the echoes of a masked figure that might still be lingering in the corners of Emily's memory. Sarah gripped the drawing. She said something once before she stopped talking about it. She said the man in the mask didn't look at her like a person. Daniel's eyes darkened. Because he didn't. He stood, the chair scraping back. Emily remembered more than we thought. And now that she's starting to draw again, she's not just remembering. She's reliving it, Sarah whispered. Daniel walked to the door. And we're going to find out who made her live through it in the first place. As he left, Shadow paused at Emily's door. For a moment, the dog stood completely still, ears forward, eyes soft. Then he turned, and without a sound, followed Daniel into the dark. Because what Emily drew wasn't just memory, it was evidence. And somewhere out there, the mask was still watching. The gate slammed shut behind Daniel Cross like the punctuation of a warning. The air inside the prison was always heavy, not just with the scent of bleach and sweat, but with the kind of silence that knew too many confessions had been screamed into cinder-block walls and left unanswered. Shadow waited in the car protocol, but somehow Daniel felt more alone now than he had in any interrogation room before. A guard led him down a dim corridor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like insects trapped behind plastic. "He's been quiet lately," the guard muttered. "Not many visitors. Didn't ask why you were coming. Just said, 'Tell him I've been expecting him.'" Daniel didn't reply. He'd rehearsed a dozen openings on the drive up. Accusatory, cold, professional, but none of them fit anymore. Not after what Shadow had uncovered, not after what Ava Emily had drawn, not after he'd started questioning if Ethan Drake had ever really been the monster everyone made him out to be. The door opened. There he was. Ethan sat at the far end of the glass-partitioned visitation room. Same close-cropped hair, same scar under his left eye from the scuffle at the warehouse raid 6 months ago. But his posture wasn't one of a predator anymore. He sat with the stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove, yet everything still to hide. Daniel picked up the phone. Ethan mirrored the movement. "I was wondering when you'd come," Ethan said, voice calm. Measured. Almost rehearsed. "You confessed," Daniel began, skipping past the preamble. "You led us to Ava. You pleaded guilty without negotiation. Why?" Ethan's eyes flicked toward the corner camera, then back. "They paid me." The words landed like a dropped anchor. "Who?" Ethan leaned in slightly. "Does it matter? You're here because something doesn't add up. You're right." "It never did." Daniel's voice dropped. "You confessed to child trafficking." Ethan gave a small, bitter laugh. "I confessed to what they needed me to confess to. That's how these things work. Sometimes justice isn't about truth. It's about closure. And I gave them that." Daniel's jaw tensed. "Are you saying you were innocent?" "No," Ethan said flatly. "I'm saying I didn't take Ava. I didn't hurt her. But I did agree to disappear into guilt." There was a pause, the kind that stretches until it feels like you're breathing underwater. "Why?" Daniel finally asked. Ethan leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Because I owed someone, and because they threatened someone else, someone who didn't deserve to end up like the others." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "You're protecting someone." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Or I was." He turned, letting the orange prison jumpsuit stretch across tired shoulders. "You ever seen a system so rotten it uses the truth as leverage? That's what they do. They find broken men, offer them a role to play, and promise protection in return." Daniel stayed silent. His gut clenched, the same way it had the night Shadow growled at the folder with Caleb Voss's name on it. "Tell me about the voice," Daniel said carefully. "The one who gave the order, 'Transport her.'" Ethan's expression hardened. "I never heard his name, just a code name. Seraph." The name hovered in the space between them like smoke. "And you took the fall for him?" "No," Ethan said. "I took the fall for someone Seraph owned, someone I cared about once. She was deep in it, deeper than she even knew. And when they came knocking, it was either her or me. And I'd already seen what they did to people who disappointed them." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Give me a name." But Ethan only smiled sadly, knowingly. "You don't find Seraph. He finds you, and when he does, he doesn't kill you. He erases you." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "They're still watching. You think this ends in here with me rotting behind bars? This is just the waiting room." Daniel's grip tightened on the receiver. Ethan noticed. "There's a girl alive because I played my part," he said. "That's the only line I've ever been proud of in this entire script. But you, Agent Cross, you're not supposed to be reading the second act." He stood abruptly. "Stop digging, or you won't like what you find." A moment later the guards came for him. Ethan didn't resist. He walked away like a man who'd made peace with every ghost he carried. Daniel sat in the plastic chair long after the door closed behind him. Seraph, a new name, a deeper shadow, and the growing certainty that Ethan Drake wasn't the story's villain. He was just the first man to drown trying to protect someone else from its ending. Outside the prison, Shadow stood beside the car tail stiff, ears perked toward the wind, as if he too had sensed the shift. Daniel looked down at the drawing Emily had given her mother just days before. A tall figure, a mask like a serpent, and behind him, more shadows. They weren't chasing ghosts. They were catching up to them. The crayons shook slightly in Ava's hand. She sat cross-legged on the floor of Sarah's sunlit living room, but there was nothing bright about the silence hanging between her and the page in front of her. Her mother watched from the edge of the couch, clutching a mug of tea long gone cold. Daniel knelt nearby, not close enough to crowd, but close enough to be there when the dam broke. Ava Emily was only 9, but her eyes held seasons no child should have seen. Each blink seemed to carry the weight of rooms without windows. Daniel's voice was soft. "Can you show me the place they kept you? You don't have to write anything, just draw it the way you remember." At first, she didn't move. Her fingers flexed around the crayon as if the pressure of memory itself made it too heavy to hold. Then slowly, she reached for the gray. The first line she drew was a corner, harsh, angled, then walls, a small cot, a chain, a single chair against the far side. The space had no window, only one bulb drawn as a tiny flicker above the door. Daniel exhaled, barely. But then Ava paused. Her other hand moved toward the box of colors. This time, black. She drew a shape in the doorway. A tall man, not Ethan, broad shoulders, slits for eyes beneath what looked like goggles, or perhaps a mask. But what stopped Daniel cold wasn't the shape. It was the detail. She added a gloved hand, left hand bare, right one black, clutching something square. And then, with an almost surgical calm, she shaded the man's mouth as a flat, grim line. "He never yelled," Ava whispered. "He just told the others what to do." Daniel's breath hitched. "The others?" Ava didn't answer, but the way her fingers pressed into the crayon said enough. Sarah reached for her daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, was that Ethan?" Ava shook her head slowly. "Ethan never came in, only when it ended. He was the first face I saw after the dark." Daniel's throat dried. "What did his voice sound like?" Ava didn't hesitate. "Like gravel, like something broken, trying to pretend it still worked." Daniel turned the sketch around, studying every line. A glove, a voice like gravel, always watching. "Can I borrow this for a moment?" he asked gently. Ava nodded. Later that evening, in the mobile forensics unit parked outside the house, Lisa Tanaka ran thermal overlays on archive surveillance. She hadn't slept much. Coffee stained the corner of her sleeve, but her eyes were sharp-focused. "Tell me again what I'm looking for?" she asked, typing with mechanical precision. Daniel handed her the drawing. "Compare this layout to the blueprint filed for the property Ethan was arrested in. I think there's a part of that house we missed." Lisa blinked. "That house was torn apart. You're saying the hidden space wasn't part of the plan?" "I'm saying the real plan was below it." Lisa tapped a few commands, then leaned in. The screen flickered with a series of layered blueprints, official floor plans, scanned thermal data, and old permit maps. Then she found it. "Right there," she said, pointing at a pocket of cold space beneath the main floor just off the utility corridor. "We thought it was foundation void, but see this? Repetitive heat signatures from 6 months ago. Something was down there, power draw too." Daniel leaned closer. "That's not a void." Lisa nodded grimly. "It's a basement, unregistered, hidden, and more chilling, just beside it, recorded only once in an overexposed thermal sweep, was a figure. Tall, motionless, arm raised like holding a tablet or control device. Daniel stared at it. One gloved hand, like the girl drew. The man with the voice like gravel. "We missed him," Lisa whispered. "He was right beneath us. The night we brought Ava out." Daniel looked out the window toward the quiet street beyond. It was dusk now. Shadows stretched long across the pavement, but nothing outside compared to the darkness that had been crafted with such careful precision. "We thought we saved her," Daniel murmured, "but she was never supposed to survive." Lisa turned toward him. "Then why is she still alive?" Daniel's voice was low. "Because someone changed the script." There was a beat of silence. Then Lisa spoke again. "This guy, the one Ava remembers, he doesn't match any of the photos Ethan was connected to, which means he's still out there," Daniel finished. "And he's watching." Lisa hesitated, then pulled something from her tablet. "You need to see this. It came through last night. Interpol flagged a whisper black market trafficker known only as Gravel. Operates under proxy networks in the Balkans. No photo, just a vocal fragment." She pressed play. A low, rasping voice filled the silence. "Transfer the girl. We go dark at dawn." Daniel's spine stiffened. It was the voice from Ava's memory. The same one from the encrypted comms during her rescue. He didn't even realize Shadow Quiet until now had growled softly from his corner, ears pinned back, eyes fixed on the playback. Daniel turned back toward Lisa, a coldness threading his gut. "This isn't over," he said. Lisa didn't argue. She just turned the screen black. And somewhere outside, in the dusk-soaked city, a man with one glove may have been listening, watching, waiting for them to get too close. The house hadn't changed. Its walls still held the scent of old insulation and rot, paint peeled like skin under strain. Daniel stood at the threshold, staring at the entry as if it might flinch. The air was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the slight creak of wood remembering footsteps. "Didn't think we'd be back here," Lisa murmured, stepping up beside him in her Kevlar vest. Daniel nodded, eyes scanning the shadows. "It's not done telling us everything." Behind them, 2 field agents unloaded scanning equipment from the black SUV. Shadow, ever silent, moved with purpose at Daniel's side, nose low to the floorboards, like memory had a scent. The basement had been cleared and catalogued months ago. But what they hadn't known, what Ava's drawing had suggested, was that beneath the floor something else had been hidden, not just behind walls, below them. Daniel descended the basement stairs first. Shadow followed, each step deliberate. Lisa flicked on the high-powered flashlight. The beam landed on a concrete panel in the far corner, barely larger than a crawl-space access door. Only now, with new thermal imaging, had it lit up as a recent addition. The panel didn't look like part of the house's original foundation. It looked surgical, engineered. "Open it," Daniel said. One of the tech agents pried at the corners with a magnetic lockbreaker. With a soft clunk, the panel shifted, a slow groan of metal against metal, and then came the smell. Not death, but something colder, like neglect, like time. Daniel dropped to one knee and looked inside. The space extended maybe 10 feet, tight, unfinished. But what caught his attention wasn't the empty walls. It was the 3 cases stacked at the back, military style, airlocked. Lisa climbed in behind him as Shadow let out a quiet, guttural growl. Daniel unlatched the top case. Inside, neatly packed, a series of old surveillance devices, audio bugs, long-range parabolic mics, and a stack of thin plastic cartridges labeled only with red grease pencil, dates, and initials. Lisa lifted one recorder. "Some of these are pre-digital, but that means—" Daniel was already pulling out the mobile audio deck from his pack. "They might have escaped the digital wipe when the team raided this place." He slotted the tape. A hiss. Then static. Then, "Camera 3 is blind. Reassign Unit B. We keep her isolated until the van's ready." Lisa froze. Another voice followed, sharper, colder, gravel-like. "You don't speak her name, you don't comfort them. They're noise, nothing more." Daniel leaned forward, listening harder. "Protocol override. Burn it all. Kids don't matter. Data does." The sentence hung in the air like a guillotine. Shadow whimpered low and unsure, then pushed himself between Daniel and the wall, his nose tapping the edge of the open crate as if to say, "This is it." Daniel's jaw clenched. That voice. Lisa met his eyes. Same one from the call, from Ava's memory. The tape continued. "If the handlers ask questions, you're deaf. If they dig, you're gone. Understood?" Another younger voice. Yes, sir." "Good. Now erase her. The body doesn't matter. Just give me the brain." Daniel stopped the tape. The silence that followed felt obscene. "I want that voice matched to every known handler from Operation Downfall, the Obsidian Coil, and anything connected to Caleb Voss," he said. Lisa was already typing. But Daniel's mind had moved beyond, because somewhere, someone had decided that children were disposable, but their minds weren't. That data was currency. And Ava, she wasn't just a victim. She was a key to something far larger. Lisa spoke again. We cross-checked this with Ava's therapy records, especially the ones where she started repeating sequences or phrases. See if she was echoing any of this. Daniel nodded, but his gaze lingered on the tape still turning in the deck. Burn it all. Kids don't matter. He repeated the words in his head, but this time something cracked beneath them. Shadow pawed softly at the case again. Daniel looked down. There, under the last recorder, a folded piece of thick paper plastic, laminated, yellowed with time. A floor plan, not of this house, of another building, labeled only in faint ink. Juniper Site 12, Transition Wing. Daniel stared at the name. Lisa leaned in. That wasn't in the raid reports. He shook his head slowly. No, because we were never supposed to know it existed. And suddenly everything clicked like a lock turning. The real facility, the handler with the voice of gravel, a girl who survived, and a dog that remembered more than any machine ever could. Daniel rose, the tape now silent in the recorder. Shadow beside him. Lisa already calling HQ. The crawl space closed behind them with a soft metal sigh. But the ghosts it left behind, they had just begun to speak. The call came in just after midnight. An old property linked to Caleb Voss, tucked in the outskirts of Wayland County, was reported ablaze. By the time Daniel and Lisa reached the perimeter, the night sky above the forest pulsed orange. Flames danced like furious specters across the gabled roof. The smell of smoke and scorched pine filled the air like warning. Daniel slammed the door of the SUV and ran toward the responders. How long ago? Structure was fully engulfed 10 minutes before we arrived, a fire captain shouted over the roar. Back half's collapsed. Front section might hold another 5 before it goes. Lisa caught up, breath short, eyes locked on the inferno. Why torch a property now? Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Shadow. The dog wasn't watching the flames. He was sniffing the air moving, pacing, then suddenly stopped. His ears perked, his posture stiffened. Then, without hesitation, Shadow ran. Through a gap in the responders' line, toward the east wing, the only section of the house still intact. Daniel took off after him. Shadow, wait! The heat seared his skin as he ducked low, weaving through burning debris. Lisa cursed and followed, waving off a firefighter's attempt to stop her. Shadow didn't pause. He circled the far side of the house and began scratching furiously at a section of scorched wood partially hidden by a collapsed trellis. Daniel crouched beside him and pulled. The panels groaned, then gave way. Behind it, a steel-reinforced door, blackened but intact. "Help me get this open!" he yelled. Lisa joined him. They pried, shoved, until the warped hinges relented. Inside was pitch black, save for the flicker of flame bleeding through the cracks. And in the center of that small, fireproof room, a chair. Bolted to the concrete, its restraints torn as if someone had once fought violently to escape. One of the cuffs still held a tuft of fabric. A child's jacket, charred at the edges. On the floor, a burned backpack, small and purple, melted at the zipper. Daniel knelt beside it. The initials AM were barely visible on a scorched label. "Ava's," Lisa whispered. "No," Daniel said quietly, holding up a faded name tag. "Alina Merrick." Lisa's breath caught. "Another girl?" Daniel stood slowly, staring at the far wall. And there it was. etched in soot, branded, not painted, a crude symbol, OC obsidian coil. They weren't just resurrecting an old network. They were erasing every remnant of it, every victim, every room, every name, with fire. Daniel reached for his radio. "We've got a secondary chamber. Possible holding cell. Evidence of restraint. One backpack, child-sized. Request full forensic sweep. Temperature's rising, we won't have long." Shadow stayed still, his nose pressed to the floorboards. He let out a low whine. Daniel looked down. A dark stain had seeped into the cracks barely visible through the soot. Not blood, tears, urine, desperation. Proof a child had been here, long enough to lose hope, long enough to fight the cuffs until they broke. Lisa looked around the sealed room. This wasn't just for holding. "No," Daniel said. "It was for breaking." A groan above them, then a shudder. The roof had given its final warning. "Let's move." They burst back into the night as embers rained around them. Behind them, the roof of the east wing collapsed into fire and ash. But what mattered had already been salvaged. Shadow sat in the mud beside the SUV, ears pinned back, tail unmoving. His eyes fixed on Daniel like he'd known all along. This place mattered. Daniel knelt and placed a hand on his neck. "You did good, boy. Real good." Lisa held the melted backpack like it was something sacred. "Do you think she's still alive? Alina?" Daniel looked at the cuff, the torn jacket, the defiant scratch marks on steel. "I think she was," he said quietly. "And I think someone went through hell to try and get her out." They both looked back at the house as it burned itself into nothing. But the real evidence wasn't fireproof. It was fear. It was that etched OOC. And now it had resurfaced. The smell of smoke still clung to Daniel's clothes as he slid the charred folder onto the table at FBI Field Command. Ash stained the metal edges. What remained inside had somehow survived the blaze, blistered paper, brittle with heat, but legible. Lisa adjusted the overhead light. Shadow lay by the door, eyes alert but unmoving, his breathing shallow, like even he could feel the weight of what they were about to see. Daniel opened the file slowly. Inside were 15 names, typed in a military stencil font. Age, gender, state, all under a column labeled Project Annam. Lisa's fingers traced the first few entries. #001, Tyler Grange, M7, status, deceased. 002, Maya Winslow, F6, status, unknown. 03, Elijah Brewster, M8, status, deceased. Some had a thick diagonal line drawn across the page. Others were left untouched, haunting in their incompletion. Daniel's jaw tensed. They weren't just taking children, they were documenting them. Lisa flipped to the last page and froze. #009, Lucas Marrow, M9, status, active hold. Daniel stared. Lucas, Ava's friend from the group home? Lisa nodded slowly. The one who vanished a year before her. Next to his name was a date, 10/07/22, the day the Marrow boy was reported missing. "Which means he might still be alive," she whispered. Daniel leaned in, flipping pages, then stopped cold. Turn 0 from 5. Sasha Dale, F5, status, initiated, 3 days ago. He felt the breath punch out of him. 3 days ago? "She was taken after the house burned," Lisa said. "She was taken while we were chasing the past." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the room. "They're still active, still pulling children into whatever the hell this is." Lisa sifted through the side pocket of the folder and found a half-melted key card, its magnetic strip warped, but the logo still visible. OOC again. Next to it, a small printed map. No street names, no landmarks. Just a single red dot marked Milestone 5 in handwritten ink. Lisa looked up. "This isn't over." Daniel nodded grimly. "It's just evolving." He turned to the wall where photos of missing children had been pinned over the months some recovered, some not. 15 new names would be added by nightfall. Shadow rose from his spot as if summoned. His ears perked. A low whine escaped his throat. Daniel met his gaze. "We'll find them." Lisa looked down at the last page, her voice barely above a whisper. "And if they're already gone?" Daniel didn't blink. "Then we bring the truth home, even if it's only to bury it right." He closed the file. But the echoes of those names, their unfinished stories, the gaps in status stayed with him, like ghosts caught between pages. The hum of the data decryption unit was the only sound in the room. Daniel stood over the terminal, like a surgeon in a trauma bay. Gloves on, breath shallow, heart racing beneath the sterile quiet. Lisa sat nearby, posture tense, eyes fixed on the progress bar crawling across the screen. The hard drive had been salvaged from beneath the floorboards of the scorched property, wrapped in thermal insulation, buried beneath a false panel next to the steel-reinforced room, miraculously intact and encrypted to hell. At 98%, Shadow stirred. Not a bark, just a low, vibrating growl from deep in his chest, eyes locked on the machine, as if he could smell what was about to be unearthed. Decryption complete. Daniel clicked into the recovered directory. No documents, just audio logs, numbered, unlabeled, 10 of them. He hit play on the earliest, a burst of static, then a voicemail, deep, unhurried, practiced, cold. "Phase sequence approved, Site 5 neutralized, 2 assets lost, acceptable ratio." Lisa's breath caught. Daniel skipped ahead. Log 004. "Reassign funding. Voss is burning too hot. If necessary, burn him for real." He froze. Lisa leaned closer. "Did he just say—" Daniel played it again. Slower. Same words, same contempt. "Burn Voss if needed." Daniel clenched his fists. "They're cleaning house." Another log. "No more names, no more data. What doesn't exist can't be subpoenaed. If the kids die, we bury the silence, not the bodies." Lisa turned pale. "He's not a field operative. This guy's higher. Coordinating." Daniel nodded slowly. "Which means Voss wasn't the architect, just a contractor." Shadow let out a sharp bark. His nose bumped against the screen just as log number 08 began to play. The Emily girl wasn't supposed to surface. That was a misfire. But she's a spark. If she remembers too much. A pause. Then a flat decision. "Then you know what to do." Lisa's voice cracked. "They wanted her dead." Daniel swallowed hard, rage simmering behind his composure. "No. They wanted her forgotten. Killing her would have drawn attention. Erasing her was easier." He reached for the external drive, slipping it into a padded case. "We have voices now. Even if we don't have names." Lisa glanced at the waveform on screen, still playing log number 010. "Clean up, no data. If the house burns, let it burn. If Voss goes down, he goes down alone. The call ended in silence, a silence more damning than screams. Daniel spoke, quiet but certain. They've built an empire on children who can't speak, can't fight, and won't be missed. Lisa looked up. But now one of them survived. Daniel nodded. And she's remembering. They stood in the dim glow of the terminal, a quiet understanding between them. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a reckoning. The room was dark, save for the sharp glow of a dozen screens flickering across Lisa's face. Her eyes were bloodshot, her posture locked in a forward lean that betrayed how long she'd been at it, pausing, rewinding, zooming, scrubbing through hours of traffic footage. Nothing. A blur, a license plate, a motel sign flickering in rain. And then there he was. The silhouette stepped from a shadowed SUV at the edge of a gas station 30 seconds before midnight. Slouched gait. Baseball cap pulled low. The frame paused mid-stride as the man glanced toward the pump camera just long enough for the security light to catch a sliver of his jawline. Lisa whispered, "Got you." She tapped keys fast. Cross-referenced timestamp. Location. A rundown motel off I-37. She scrubbed another angle, different lens, different feed. He was at the check-in desk, speaking to a woman behind bulletproof glass. No sound, but she saw the ID slide under. Pause. Zoom. The name read, Marcus Dale. Fake, of course. But the face? Unmistakable. Caleb Voss. Lisa didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She just stood up and grabbed her phone. Within minutes, the team mobilized. Tactical gear. Silent formation. No sirens. No lights. Daniel stood outside the SUV, his hand brushing the worn collar on Shadow's neck. The dog sat alert beside him, ears forward, body coiled like a spring. Lisa joined him. Room 12B, booked under alias 3 days ago. No guests seen entering or leaving with him. He's alone, or good at hiding company. Daniel's eyes were stone. We go quiet. No spooking. Shadow let out a low whuff, his nose turned toward the distant building. The motel loomed ahead, 2 stories of mildew, flickering neon, and forgotten souls. But that night, it housed more than neglect. It housed a ghost that wasn't supposed to still be walking. Daniel motioned. Agents fanned out, silent, swift. As they surrounded room 12B, Lisa's voice came over comms. Heat signature detected. 1 occupant, no movement. Daniel's hand hovered near his weapon. Shadow's body tensed, then froze. Inside that room, somewhere beyond the peeling door and stale curtain, was a man who'd once vanished into fire, and tonight he'd be pulled back into the light. The door creaked open with a hesitance that didn't match the urgency in Daniel's chest. Glock drawn, breath held, he stepped into room 207 and stopped cold. Empty. Not just vacated, but scrubbed, cleared, sanitized to the point of unease. A single bulb buzzed overhead, casting a jaundiced glow on faded wallpaper and a floor that still smelled faintly of bleach. The air was too still. Lisa moved in behind him. Thermal scan was clean, no recent heat signatures. He's gone. Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes swept the room bed untouched, mini-fridge unplugged, closet empty. And then he saw it. Scrawled in what looked like thick black marker across the dusty vanity mirror were 4 words. You're too late, Cross. Not printed. Written. Like someone took their time. Mocking in its neatness. Lisa approached, her voice a whisper. He knew you were coming. Daniel stared at his own reflection, layered behind the message. His face was calm, but his knuckles were white on the grip of his weapon. Then Shadow moved. The German shepherd padded across the linoleum floor, nose twitching. He paused at the sink, let out a soft, uncertain whine, then nudged something metallic with his paw. Daniel stepped closer. Inside the drain, a tiny, jagged tooth fragment, rimmed with dried pink. Shadow backed away. Lisa swore under her breath, already pulling out a sterile evidence bag. Could be animal. Could be worse. Daniel's voice was gravel. Send it to the lab. Rush. 2 hours later, the results came in. Human, female, approximate age 9. DNA match, Sasha Dale. Daniel didn't speak. He simply looked out the motel window at the vacant lot beyond. Every time they got closer, someone made sure the ground beneath them fell away. This wasn't just a chase anymore. It was personal. And whoever they were hunting wanted it to be. The wheels of the SUV screeched against tarmac as Daniel leapt out, badge raised, heart pounding. The wind from the twin-engine jet still cooling beside the private hangar cut through his coat like a blade. Caleb Voss was 20 yards ahead, calm, upright, dressed in charcoal slacks and a pressed white shirt, as if boarding a business flight, not fleeing a federal investigation involving child trafficking and buried truths. "Caleb Voss!" Daniel's voice cracked across the air like thunder. "On your knees! Hands behind your head!" Voss didn't flinch. He turned slowly, his face aged, weather-lined, and marked with an old scar slicing through his right brow held no fear. Only knowing. And then he smiled. It wasn't smug. It wasn't angry. It was tired and something else. "Agent Cross," he said, lowering himself to the asphalt without resistance. "You're quicker than I expected." Agents moved in. Cuffs clicked. Lisa stepped beside Daniel, watching Voss closely. "You ran?" she said coldly. "I walked," he corrected, tone almost casual. "Running implies guilt. I've been carrying someone else's burden for a decade." Daniel crouched near him. "Who's behind the obsidian coil? Who gave the order to move the kids?" Voss looked up, eyes tired but sharp. "I was never the one," he whispered. "Ask the girl. Ask Ava. She remembers more than she says." A sharp ping broke the air. One of the agents cursed. Voss's burner phone, confiscated seconds ago, lit up. New message. Daniel stepped closer and read the screen. "We are not done." No name, no number, just a signal, a warning. Voss chuckled quietly to himself. "You see? Even in chains, they're still watching, still pulling strings." Shadow growled softly nearby, as if sensing what Daniel already knew. Voss wasn't the center of this web. He was just another strand. The war room buzzed in a low hum, monitors flickering, whiteboards crammed with redacted printouts, and the constant hiss of the forensic scanner clawing through layers of corrupted files. Lisa sat hunched at her station, her eyes ringed with exhaustion but burning with purpose. The hard drive recovered from Voss's bunker was charred on one side, its casing blackened and warped. It had taken 2 days and a dozen failed extraction attempts. But now something clicked. Lisa's fingers flew across the keyboard. A checksum aligned. Encryption blinked. And then, suddenly, lines of code unraveled into legible fragments. Her breath caught. Root, log, auction, X57, TSV, Meta Keys, Cities 01, Jason. She opened the first log. Rows of coordinates spilled across the screen. Not just one route, not even two, 6. 6 separate transport corridors plotted with timestamps and truck IDs, some as recent as 4 months ago. Origin points were black sites. Destinations? Scattered across the country. Denver, Baton Rouge, Detroit. A warehouse near the Arizona border. "Daniel," she called hoarsely, "you need to see this." He moved beside her quickly. Shadow stirred near the wall, rising from his rest, with ears perked sensing the shift. "What are we looking at?" Daniel asked. Lisa pointed at the screen. "It's not just Ava, not just Sasha Dale. They were part of a stream. This is logistics, cold, clinical. They moved them like inventory." She opened the auction file. Names, ages, notes on behavior. Some marked as trained, others as untested. She scrolled until her hands shook. A familiar name, Lucas J. Brandt. Age 11. Recovered. Status unknown. Below it, Cassandra Wu. Age 9. Transfer incomplete. Daniel's jaw clenched. "Where are these buyers?" Lisa highlighted the metadata. Cross-referencing locations with IP logs, she pulled up server paths and aliases. Behind them, shell accounts. Foreign and domestic. One bounced through Dubai, another Sevastopol, another Washington, D.C. She sat back slowly, eyes wide. This wasn't just tolerated. It was protected. Daniel didn't speak for a moment. Then softly, "Get me the list of cities. We're going to tear through each one." Behind them, Shadow let out a low, warning growl, as if the ghost in the machine had teeth. The warehouse in Detroit was a skeleton steel bones, no windows, no heat, just concrete that held secrets tighter than any vault. The team had swept the structure twice, but Shadow's behavior said otherwise. He froze near the back wall, nose to the ground, pawing gently. Not alert, not aggressive. Almost reverent. Lisa knelt down. "You see something, boy?" Shadow's ears flicked back. A low whine escaped him. Daniel moved in with a portable ground-penetrating scanner. Minutes passed. Then an anomaly. A hollow beneath the slab. Reinforced. Sealed tight. 3 hours later, after a diamond saw and 2 exhausted agents, the slab gave way to darkness. They descended one by one. Below wasn't storage. It was something far colder. A basement room, 10 by 15 feet, lined floor to ceiling with old server racks, humidity-controlled cabinets, and vacuum-sealed crates. The scent was sterile, too clean, too careful. Lisa's flashlight caught a terminal still glowing in the far corner. Unlike the charred hard drives from before, this one was pristine, unplugged, but humming faintly, shielded. She powered it on. A prompt blinked. "Enter Ayuth code." She ran a bypass, her hands trembling, not from fear, but fury. This was no longer about pieces of a puzzle. This was the puzzle. The screen blinked again. "Welcome to Gateway." X. Load. Catalog live. Last accessed 72 HRs ago. Her voice cracked. "It was opened 3 days ago." Daniel's tone darkened. Someone was here. Lisa opened the catalog file, and what she saw hollowed her. Rows of names, each with a serial ID, blood type, age, psychological resilience index. Some had behavioral annotations: compliant, defiant, silent cry reflex, holds eye contact under duress. Others had numeric tags beside them, 1 to 5, a ranking system. Some were flagged red deceased, others were marked blue in transit, and one at the very top was marked with a single word: active. A girl named Nina Riker, age 10, blood type AB, unusually adaptive under confinement. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. Where was she accessed from? Lisa traced the IP route, partially masked but bouncing through a network node in Topeka, Kansas. "We're not chasing ghosts anymore," she said, eyes locked on the screen. "We're chasing real-time commands." Daniel looked toward the stairwell, then down at Shadow, who stared into the shadows like they were breathing. The silence down there wasn't quiet. It was waiting. The air near the docks was thick with salt, diesel, and regret. Cold wind snapped off the bay, but Daniel barely felt it. His eyes stayed fixed on the blinking red dot on the tablet, a trace of the signal Lisa had isolated from the basement's live access log. It had pinged again, then vanished, but not before triangulating to Pier 19, a private loading section rarely active this time of year. Lisa sprinted beside him, gear rattling, heart pounding. Shadow led, nose low, movements taut as a wire. When he reached the end of the pier, he froze. Then he howled, a low, guttural sound that didn't echo so much as bleed into the silence. Daniel tightened his grip on the radio. "We're close." Below them, waves slapped hard against the hull of a departing cargo vessel. Lights still flickered along the edge of its stern, red, then white, fading. Lisa scanned the manifest on a nearby clipboard, abandoned and damp. Ship name, Laurel Crest. Departure, 15 minutes ago. Destination. She paused, eyes narrowing. Classified as private security export. Daniel's voice dropped. Private security? Lisa's fingers danced across her tablet, pulling up the vessel's route. It's headed southeast, into international waters by nightfall. Shadow growled. His paw scraped across the dock, then slid to the edge of a metal grating. Lisa knelt. Beneath it, burnt papers, smudged names, part of a map, all doused in gasoline. Daniel's phone rang. He answered. "Go." A voice from Harbor Control. "We flagged the ship. But, sir, they're using diplomatic registry." "We can't legally stop them." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then illegally tell me what's on board." But there was no time. The signal blinked one last time on Lisa's screen, then flatlined. Gone. He looked up. The ship was a blur now, swallowed by mist and motion. A red light on its tail blinked like a heartbeat. Faint. Fading. "We were here," Daniel said, almost to himself. "We were right here." Shadow whined beside him, tail low, eyes locked on the horizon as if willing it to rewind. But the sea doesn't give back what it takes. Not without cost. The map was scorched at the edges, part of it soaked with salt and streaked with oil. But what remained was enough, a latitude, scribbled in haste, paired with a triangle drawn in red ink. Lisa circled it 3 times. "Fort Blackwood," she murmured. "Abandoned military facility. Decommissioned, 2009. Daniel leaned over her shoulder, brow furrowed. "That's not just a facility. That used to be a covert training ground for Special Forces Echo teams, extraction units. It was off books. Never meant to exist." "And now?" Lisa asked. He exhaled, jaw tightening. "Now it's being used for something else." The chopper ride took 40 minutes over open sea into cloud cover that turned the world a hazy gray. The closer they got, the less the ocean looked like water and more like steel. Even Shadow grew tense, pawing at the floor as if sensing something unnatural. As they descended, the island came into view, a slab of rock no bigger than a town square, ringed by cliffs and dead trees. And in the center, half consumed by ivy and time, stood the bones of a once bustling compound. A rusted sign swayed in the breeze, Calderon Children's Initiative, NGO Shelter for Crisis Relief. "Cute disguise," Lisa muttered. But the place was a ghost. No heat signatures, no movement, no communication signal. They stepped through the broken main gate, boots crunching glass. The place reeked of mildew, seawater, and abandonment, but not the natural kind. This was a facility left in a hurry. Clipboards still hung from pegs. A row of neatly folded children's clothes sat untouched on a table. Shadow padded forward, ears erect. He stopped at a metal door, scratched once, then twice. Daniel opened it. Inside was a corridor that didn't match the blueprint's lower ceilings. Insulated walls, soundproofing. The kind of place built to silence screams. They passed empty bunk rooms. Surveillance panels with dust-covered lenses. Restraint cuffs attached to hospital beds, now cut open. Old IV bags still hung limp on steel stands. At the far end of the corridor, Lisa found it. A locked server rack, powered by a backup battery that hadn't yet died. She plugged in a line. The screen flickered to life. A prompt in red. Last manifest accessed 3 days ago. "Same window as the dock signal," she said. Daniel looked around. They moved fast. Lisa pulled a drive from her pack and began transferring the files. As she did, her voice dropped. "Daniel, this was never about hiding. It was about movement. They weren't storing victims here. They were sorting them." He didn't answer right away. His gaze had drifted to the wall near the window where the paint had peeled in the shape of a child's palm print. Small, faint, frozen in time. The silence was heavy, too complete. Shadow whimpered, and then the screen blinked again, one final line. "Transit complete. Receiving site. OC North Node." Daniel stared at it. "What's OC?" Lisa asked. He swallowed. "Maybe not what," he said. "Maybe who." The wind had changed. Daniel felt it as they stepped beneath the fractured archway of the inner compound, an airless silence, too still for an island that used to breathe with military drills and seaborne rescues. Now it lay hollow, forgotten but not empty. Shadow bristled, his fur catching the gray light as he sniffed the edges of the ruins. His movements were cautious, deliberate, like he knew the ground held echoes not meant to be disturbed. "This place was never a shelter," Lisa said behind him, scanning with a UV wand. "It was a funnel." They moved through what had once been a courtyard. Overgrown vines twisted like veins across crumbling brick. The deeper they walked, the less natural everything became. The floor sloped down into a wing not marked on any map. Here, the walls narrowed. Blood marked the concrete thin smears, not recent, but not ancient. Rust-colored fingerprints trailing along doorframes. One long streak low to the ground, as if a child had tried to hold on. "No bodies," Agent Cardenas murmured. But this was recent. Weeks, not months. Daniel's breath thickened in his chest. His flashlight scanned over a cot frame with a torn sheet still tucked neatly beneath the mattress. A single stuffed bear lay face down on the floor, one button eye missing. Nearby, a discarded syringe cap still on gleamed under Lisa's wand. "Midazolam," she said, reading the faded label. "Used to keep children compliant, or forgetful." Daniel clenched his jaw. Not forgetful enough. Shadow growled low and guttural as he stopped at a metal hatch sunken into the floor. Daniel pulled it open, the hinges shrieking. A short ladder dropped into darkness. No one hesitated. The air below was colder. This was the hollow. A corridor ran beneath the facility lined with observation windows that now stared into empty rooms. Inside, small chairs bolted to the floor, drawings taped to the walls, smiling suns, crooked houses, one labeled "Me plus Mommy," in a scrawl that made Lisa's hand tremble when she touched the glass. Then came the door. Room 14. Shadow stopped, sat. Daniel pressed his hand to the rusted latch. It opened. The room was scorched near the ceiling, as if someone had tried to burn evidence and stopped halfway. But on the floor, beneath ash and dirt, lay something unmistakable. A child's backpack faded red, one strap torn. Daniel knelt slowly. His gloved fingers wiped soot from the front pocket. There, stitched in a mother's careful hand, Lucas. No last name, no embellishments, just the truth of who the bag belonged to, clinging stubbornly through fire and dust. Daniel didn't speak. Shadow edged closer and rested his chin on the backpack, eyes dark and wide, unmoving. Lisa's voice broke the silence. "We're not too late. Someone wanted this found." Agent Cardenas stepped forward. "Then where is he now?" Daniel stood, backpack in hand. "If they left this behind, it means one of two things. They were sloppy, or they wanted us to follow." From the ceiling, a slow drip echoed like a metronome of dread. Outside, a fog was rolling in from the sea-thick, cold, and full of unspoken things. Lisa tapped her earpiece. "Get the files from the manifest matched. Cross-reference recent transport out of island airspace. Private crafts, helicopters, unlogged routes." "And if nothing turns up?" someone asked. Daniel turned toward the exit, Shadow beside him. "Then we start tearing down every inch of the water between here and that OC node," he said, "until the hollow gives them back." The shaft had been sealed behind a false wall, a sliver of air, invisible unless you listened, not with your ears, but with instinct. Shadow had found her. He barked once, short and sharp, at the corner of the room lined with cracked insulation and rust-stained grates. Daniel was on his knees in seconds, peeling back the hollow paneling. The grate groaned as he pried it open. Inside, a pair of eyes stared back, wide, unblinking, too big for her small face, too knowing for a child who should have still believed in good dreams. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. Just stared, frozen. Daniel dropped his voice to something soft. "It's okay. You're safe now. My name is Daniel. This is Shadow." The dog didn't move, just lay down, tail barely thumping once. The child crawled forward inch by inch until she reached the threshold, then stopped. Her voice was barely there. "Is he gone?" "Who?" She looked at Shadow. "The man in the mask." Daniel exchanged a glance with Lisa, who had just entered behind him. The girl stepped into the light. 9, maybe 10. Dirt smudged her cheeks, hair tangled and damp. She held her hands together as if praying, or remembering how. "My name is Maya," she whispered. Lisa's hand gently grazed the girl's arm. "Maya, you're safe. No one here will hurt you." The child didn't answer. She was listening, not to them, but to silence. Then suddenly, "He wears the same mask," Every room. I saw him take Lucas. Daniel stiffened. Lucas was here? She nodded. He cried. I gave him my blanket. I think he tried to run. Lisa crouched. Do you remember when they took him? Maya's lips trembled, but she didn't cry. 2 nights ago. The big boat came. They didn't turn on the lights, but I counted the footsteps. 7 up, 8 down, then a door, then... Quiet. Daniel's voice cracked. A boat? She nodded again, slower. He wasn't the only one. Shadow whined low and uncertain, as if he knew the trail had grown colder. Lisa whispered, They moved them early, before we got the hard drive decrypted. Daniel knelt, looking into Maya's eyes, steady, but not forceful. The man in the mask, did he talk? Maya pressed her lips together. He hums, a song, but not like a happy one. Lisa's brow furrowed. Do you know the words? No words, Maya said, just low, like bees. A pause. Then Maya asked almost shyly, Is Lucas your boy? Daniel blinked, breath caught mid-motion. Yes, he said. Yes, he is. Maya looked down, and for the first time her shoulders shook, quietly, almost with shame. I should have stopped them, she whispered. No, Daniel said, kneeling again. You survived. You did exactly what you had to. Lisa reached into her vest, pulling out a thermal blanket. She wrapped it around the child's shoulders with care, like closing a wound. We're going to get you out of here, she said softly. You're not alone anymore. But Maya wasn't looking at her. Her eyes were on Shadow, who had crept close and now pressed his head gently against her leg, as if sensing what no adult could touch. Maya sank to her knees and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, burying her face in his fur. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry. And Shadow let her. Daniel rose to his feet, his voice quiet but steady. We get the Coast Guard on high alert. Every shipping route within 300 nautical miles. We find that boat. Lisa looked at him. And if it's gone already? Daniel clenched his fists. Then we hunt the mask, the song, and the silence. Outside, the storm finally broke. But inside the hollow, a single spark remained. Not all were lost. At 3:27 a.m., Lisa's eyes burned from hours of combing satellite feeds and maritime logs. She stared at the blinking path on her screen, each point time-stamped and drifting further northwest away from hope. The Atlas Meridian, registered under a Panamanian shell company, flagged as diplomatic cargo transport. Its latest trajectory, veering through Canadian waters toward the southern tip of Alaska. Unboardable. Untouchable. Got it, Lisa muttered under her breath. Daniel stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw rigid. Show me. She rotated the screen. This is our boat. Last ping was 6 hours ago, just off Haida Gwaii. Cargo manifest says textile machinery bound for a medical relief NGO in Anchorage. But it's clean, too clean, not even ballast water discharge recorded. And this, she tapped a red seal embedded in the digital header, is a diplomatic registry, Category 5, Immunity Class. Daniel stared at it. So we can't board. We can't even request inspection without triggering an international incident, Lisa replied, bitter. Which means someone with very high clearance pulled strings to give this thing ghost status. He rubbed his forehead, Shadow seated at his side. The dog's ears were alert but unmoving, as if sensing the tension bleeding through the room. Lisa added, quieter now. They timed this. Maya said 2 nights ago. They waited until we got close, then moved. This ship's been rerouted twice in the last 48 hours. Somebody's piloting it reactively. Daniel's voice was low. Lucas is on that ship. Lisa nodded once. I'd bet my life on it. Shadow let out a faint whine. It was enough to make Daniel kneel, his hand resting on the dog's flank. There's more, Lisa said. The ship's encryption pattern matches one we intercepted months ago when we thought it was a weapons transfer in the Baltic. Same scrambled key, same decoy signatures, but now we know what they were really transporting. Children. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. Daniel stood. Where's the ship now? Headed toward the Alaskan archipelago, Lisa replied, flipping screens. Weather's rough up there. Could disappear into any of those straits and we'd never find it unless it wants to be found. He paced. What's the crew manifest? Redacted. Every name. There's no captain, no crew on record. Hell, the ship's older than most Coast Guard staff decommissioned twice, then suddenly active again under a diplomatic coat. Daniel looked out the window into the pre-dawn mist, the world still asleep. This isn't trafficking, he said quietly. This is black site level movement. Lisa turned to him. We need someone above bureau clearance. Daniel's eyes narrowed. I know someone. He didn't elaborate. Lisa didn't ask, because something darker settled between them then. The realization that even as far as they'd come through encrypted warehouses, burned orders, missing children, and masks in the dark, they were still dancing at the edge of a deeper abyss, and the ocean, wide and merciless, had taken their boy, for now. Shadow rose, eyes locked with Daniel's. There was no hesitation in the dog. Only focus, the kind you see before a leap. Daniel said softly, we get him back, no matter how far, no matter who burns. And somewhere far offshore, in the belly of a ship with no country, no name, and no soul. A child whispered for his father in the dark. The sky over the Pacific bled into cold iron. Storm clouds hung low, casting bruised reflections on the swells below. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer sliced through the dark waters at flank speed, its crew briefed under a veil of silence and urgency. Officially, they weren't here. Unofficially, they were the only line between hope and disappearance. Daniel stood on deck beside Commander Reyes, his eyes never leaving the steel silhouette growing on the horizon, the Atlas Meridian. Intercept in 4 minutes, Reyes said, the wind whipping his jacket. We don't wait, Daniel replied, jaw set. We go now. Roger that. The Zodiac launched fast. Cold salt water slapped against faces, stung eyes, numbed fingers. But none of that registered for Daniel. Not the biting wind, not the burn of exhaustion. Only one image stayed fixed in his mind. A small boy with blue shoes and a paper airplane folded from the corner of a cereal box. Shadow stood poised at the bow, his body rigid with purpose, nose lifted toward the scent that had never truly left him. They reached the hull. The ship loomed like a dead god, rusted and hollow, with false flags fluttering in the wind. Boarding cables caught, hooks found purchase. Then the team moved, silent, swift, surgical. Inside it was colder than expected. The lights flickered, a stutter in the darkness, as if the walls themselves resented being touched. No crew, no noise, just hums of machinery and the smell of antiseptic and metal. Shadow stopped suddenly at a T-junction. His ears perked. Then, without waiting, he took off left. Shadow, Daniel hissed, but followed. They passed storage rooms with numbered crates, some labeled with meaningless codes, others with nothing at all. Each door they passed felt like a verdict. But Shadow didn't slow. He reached a set of double steel doors and froze. Daniel stepped forward and placed a hand on the latch. "It's freezing." "Storage bay," Lisa's voice crackled through the comms. "Temperature's reading sub-zero." "Why would they keep kids?" Reyes began, then stopped. No one wanted to say it. Shadow growled low, then, in a blur, launched forward and scratched at the base of the door. His cry wasn't loud, but it was urgent. Daniel moved. "We're breaching." 1 strike, 2. On the 3rd, the door gave with a screech. A blast of icy air met them like a slap. Fog billowed out, and within it rows of reinforced cages lined the chamber like mausoleums. One was open, and inside, curled small as a breath, was Lucas. Daniel's heart seized. He ran, boots skidding on frost. "Lucas! Lucas!" The boy didn't respond, but his chest moved. Barely. Shadow reached him first. The dog nosed gently at the boy's cheek, then whined. Lucas stirred. Eyes fluttered, lips blue. But he whispered one word. "Dad." Daniel collapsed to his knees and gathered the boy into his arms, ignoring the cold that bit through clothes and skin. He cradled Lucas to his chest, feeling the shiver of life still there. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe now." Lisa and Reyes arrived seconds later with medkits and thermal blankets. "Sedated," Lisa said, scanning vitals, "but pulse is steady. He's going to make it." Shadow didn't move. He sat close, one paw stretched gently across Lucas's shoe, like anchoring a soul that had wandered too far. It wasn't just a rescue. It was a reclamation of life, of dignity, of a promise kept in the coldest of places. Daniel looked down at the boy in his arms, then at Shadow. The dog's breath was visible in the cold air. But his eyes burned with heat, resolve, relief, and something almost human, pride. The ship creaked as if groaning under the weight of what it had carried. Somewhere beneath them, the engines pulsed with a rhythm that didn't feel mechanical, but alive. The Atlas Meridian was moving again, just slightly, enough to unnerve. "Command deck's clear except one heat signature," Lisa said over comms. "North corridor, top level." Daniel didn't wait. Shadow flanked him, ears forward, tail stiff with tension. His paws made no sound on the steel grates as they ascended the narrow stairwell. Each step felt like a countdown. When they reached the final door, Daniel paused. No sound from the other side, just the distant thrum of power. He looked at Shadow. The dog gave one slow blink. Then Daniel kicked in the door. The control room wasn't large. It was clinical, layered in blue-lit monitors and blinking arrays. A shattered coffee cup lay near a control panel. A vent fan spun overhead, its whir too calm for the chaos around it. And in the center, standing with gloved hands behind his back, was the man. He wore a tailored coat, immaculately pressed slacks, and a mask. White, smooth, no eye holes. Just 2 narrow slits where breath escaped in cold puffs. Daniel raised his weapon. "Hands where I can see them." The masked figure didn't move, didn't speak, just tilted his head slightly, like studying a reflection. Then he stepped backward toward a steel hatch in the floor. "Stop!" Daniel barked. "Don't!" The man paused, then finally spoke. Voice filtered, metallic, but calm as scripture. "Shadow protocol initiated. You can't stop what you don't understand." Then he dropped. The hatch slammed shut behind him with a magnetic hiss. Daniel lunged forward, but it was too late. The underwater chute was already draining. Nothing visible but the echo of rushing water and darkness. Shadow barked once, sharp, defiant. Lisa's voice cracked through the comms. "He's gone. I'm tracing sub-route exfil paths now. This was planned." Daniel stared at the empty hatch, hands clenched, chest heaving. The man hadn't run. He'd retreated, and he left a message that felt less like a warning and more like the start of something far worse. Behind him, Shadow let out a low growl, almost mournful. Daniel knelt beside the chute, pressing his hand to the steel that still radiated the man's heat. Shadow protocol. Whatever that meant, it was personal, and it wasn't over. Morning broke over the base hospital with a kind of hesitant gentleness. Sunlight filtered through clouds like it was unsure if it was welcome. Lucas sat in the corner of the recovery room, wrapped in a blanket too big for his frame. His eyes were open but distant, like he was still somewhere cold and locked shut. The IV in his arm beeped softly with every drop. No words. Not yet. Then the door opened. Elena. She didn't speak, just ran. Dropped to her knees and clutched him, hands trembling as they gripped his shoulders, his hair, his cheeks, anything real. "My baby. Oh my God, my baby." Lucas blinked. Then, like the sun through fog, he leaned into her. His hand gripped a fistful of her shirt and didn't let go. It was the first sound he made in days. A single, broken whisper. "Mom." The nurse stepped out silently. Across the hallway, behind a one-way mirror, Daniel watched. Shadow sat beside him, tail unmoving, ears lowered. His eyes never left the boy. Lisa entered. "He's stable, no signs of long-term damage. But trauma that deep. It's going to take time." Daniel nodded, but his jaw was tight. "Time they don't all get." Down the corridor, Ava sat beside Maya on the floor of the therapy room. No chairs, just a warm rug, markers, and silence. Maya drew a dog, then a house, then nothing. Her hand hovered. Ava's sketchpad rested in her lap. She'd drawn the man again. The same mask, same posture. But the background had changed. First a hallway, then a boat, then something new, a tunnel with lights like eyes. Every time she picked up the charcoal, the lines shifted, not consciously, almost like memory correcting itself. Dr. Layton studied the drawings quietly. "You said he only spoke to you once?" Ava nodded. "He asked if I could still hear them." "Who's them, Ava?" Ava stared down at the drawing, then picked up a black pencil and slowly began adding new figures behind the man in the mask. Children, all faceless, all reaching out. Outside, in the courtyard below, Daniel leaned against the railing. The wind tugged at his coat, but he didn't move. Shadow sat at his feet, still, watching, like he was waiting for something to return from the silence. Because even with the boy home, even with the name Lucas no longer just a ghost in a file, something deeper still echoed unanswered. And Ava's sketches were beginning to speak, not in words, but in warnings. Rain fell gently against the windows of the recovery center, streaking the glass with muted rivers of gray. Inside, Ava sat cross-legged on the floor, a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. Her fingers, stained with charcoal, moved slowly, deliberately across the page. Each stroke was quieter than breath. Lisa approached without speaking. She didn't want to startle her. Ava looked up only when she was finished. "I didn't dream this one," she said softly. She turned the pad around. Lisa's stomach knotted. It was Daniel drawn from behind, standing near the edge of a tree line. Shadow sat next to him, head turned as if sensing something out of frame. The detail was uncanny. Daniel's posture, the slight wind in his coat, even the bend in Shadow's tail. But it was the background that froze Lisa. Behind the trees, barely visible, was a figure. The mask was the same as before, featureless, egg-shaped, split by a faint vertical line. But now the figure held something up. Not a weapon, not a threat. A symbol. Two interlocking rings, one shattered in half down the center, the obsidian coil. Broken. Lisa stepped back. "When did you see this?" Ava didn't answer at first. She was staring past Lisa now toward the window. Her voice, when it came, was almost a whisper. "Not in the dream. Outside." Lisa turned. Beyond the glass, trees swayed in the wind, empty, still. But Ava's eyes didn't blink. "He was watching. He's not gone, is he?" Lisa moved fast, scooping up the pad and sprinting down the hallway. Daniel was already on the roof, pacing. Shadow was alert, ears pricked toward the woodline beyond the perimeter fence. Lisa held up the drawing, wind tearing at her coat. "Daniel!" He took one look. His eyes darkened. "No, he's never been gone." Shadow growled low in his throat, stepping forward toward the trees, then stopped, just for a moment, and stared, as if he too saw something the others couldn't, something that wasn't supposed to still be there, and somewhere in the leaves unseen by the world. The watcher remained. The river moved like memory, slow, deliberate, carrying pieces of the past no one could quite name. Daniel walked along the bank, his boots leaving shallow prints in the muddy earth. Shadow padded silently beside him, paws brushing the tall grass. No leash, no command, just the quiet rhythm of two survivors, breathing in the same fractured stillness. The trees along the opposite shore had started to shed, their skeletal limbs casting long shadows across the water. Overhead, clouds drifted low and heavy. It was one of those days where the world felt paused between breaths. Daniel stopped at a bend in the trail where the river curved wide, revealing the open sky. He reached down, absently rubbing the fur behind Shadow's ears. The German shepherd leaned into his side, steady as ever, solid, grounding. For a moment Daniel let himself believe it might actually be over. Then came the sound. Not loud, not violent, just a hum, mechanical, too smooth for nature. Shadow's ears twitched. Daniel looked up. A drone, civilian class, small, fast, with a dull black casing that reflected no sunlight. It hovered 30 feet above, still as a ghost. No camera visible, but Daniel knew better. A hiss of compressed air. A capsule dropped, tumbling through the wind before landing with a soft thump in the grass nearby. Daniel crouched. The capsule was made of carbon polymer, lightweight, military grade. A compartment snapped open at his touch. Inside was a single folded slip of paper. No ink smudge, no fingerprint. Just 5 printed words. "We're watching her too." The wind kicked up, cold. Daniel looked back toward the woods where the rehab center lay hidden behind trees, toward Ava. Shadow growled low in his throat. Not a bark, not a whimper. Just that deep, bone-rattling rumble that meant one thing: they were close. Daniel straightened, eyes narrowing at the horizon. He didn't crumple the note. He didn't call it in. He just whispered, to the wind, to Shadow, to whatever listening presence had chosen this moment. "We're not done." The drone rose again, vanishing into the gray clouds without a sound. In a world shadowed by darkness, stories like this remind us of the unwavering light that lives in loyalty, love, and silent courage. At the heart of this journey was not just a man or a case, but a bond between human and animal that defied fear, corruption, and even death itself. Shadow, the German shepherd who never needed words to speak volumes, became more than a partner. He became hope. These stories are not fiction for many. All around us, animals, especially dogs, stand beside us, protect us, heal us. German shepherds, with their fierce intelligence and gentle devotion, embody the best of both strength and empathy. They teach us to listen not just with our ears, but with our hearts. Behind every rescue, every tear, and every whisper in the dark is a deeper truth, that kindness saves, loyalty endures, and even in the face of unthinkable cruelty, there is always a path back to light. May we honor these silent guardians. May we fight for those who cannot speak. And may we never forget that sometimes salvation comes on four legs, with a steady gaze and a heartbeat full of love.